Every single time you stream a movie, fire off an email, or just chat with a friend online, you're tapping into this huge, invisible world of technology. But have you ever stopped to wonder how it all gets built? I mean, it doesn't just pop into existence. It's deployed, piece by painstaking piece, starting from a simple purchase order and ending up as the digital backbone of our entire world. So, let's pull back the curtain and see how it's actually done. So that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? How do you take a bunch of cardboard boxes filled with servers and cables and software and somehow turn all of that into something that can power a global service? And not just power it, but do it reliably, securely, 24/7. It seems impossibly complex. Well, the best way to wrap your head around it is to think of it like building a city from scratch. Seriously, you wouldn't just start throwing up skyscrapers willy-nilly, right? No way. You need a blueprint, you need foundations, a power grid, roads, and every single one of those steps has to be planned and executed with incredible care. So this idea, this digital city, is going to be our guide through this whole process. And just like any real city, it all begins with the blueprint. This is the stage where an abstract idea, that purchase order for all the gear, gets transformed into a super detailed plan for a fully functioning system. This is where the entire project really takes shape, long before a single cable ever gets plugged in. Okay, now we get to roll up our sleeves and get to the first phase of construction, laying the foundation. This is where all the physical hardware gets assembled and the core software gets installed. In our city analogy, this is like grading the land, pouring all that concrete, and laying down the essential utility grid that literally everything else is going to depend on. This whole foundation phase really breaks down into three big steps. First, you've got to build the physical space, the data center itself. Then, you start installing all the hardware, the servers, the storage, the networking gear. And finally, you configure the systems, which is basically bringing all that inert hardware to life with software. Let's take a closer look at what that actually involves. A city is completely useless without a reliable power grid, right? Well, in a data center, this means you need redundant power. You're running totally separate cables on separate fuses to every single rack. And the whole point here is that if one of those power lines fails, the other one just keeps everything humming along. No single point of failure can cause a citywide blackout. Computers generate an insane amount of heat. So our digital city needs its own perfectly controlled weather system. We're talking powerful air conditioning, humidity control, carefully managed airflow, all to make sure none of the critical components ever overheat. It's a nonstop 24/7 job just to maintain this perfect climate. All right, so once the environment is just right, you install the racks. Now think of these as the steel skeletons of our city's skyscrapers. They're the secure structures that are going to house all that valuable computer, storage, and network hardware. And where you put them is key. You need enough room to work, and you definitely can't overload them. Now, this might seem like a really simple, boring step, but trust me, this is so critical. This is the city's entire network of roads and subways and communication lines. Every single cable is meticulously put in place and labeled. Why? Because imagine something goes wrong at 3 a.m. You need to be able to trace the problem instantly, not spend hours guessing which one of the thousands of identical-looking cables is the bad one. So, with the physical city built, it's time to give it a brain. The operating systems get installed on the servers. The networks and firewalls get configured. These are basically the traffic laws and the security checkpoints. Then you deploy monitoring and backup tools. Think of those as the city's emergency services. And finally, every single thing is documented in a central database, which is like the city's official hall of records. Our digital city is now fully built. It looks great, but would you open a brand new city to the public without making sure the bridges can hold the weight or that the power grid can handle a heat wave? Of course not. So now we move to phase 2, the stress test. This is where we throw everything we possibly can at it just to see if it breaks. And this table just illustrates the different kinds of tests perfectly. Functional testing asks the basic question, hey, can cars even drive on the roads? Performance testing asks, okay, sure, but what about rush hour? Can the roads handle that? Security testing is all about checking if the locks on the buildings are strong enough. And finally, availability testing. That's when you simulate a disaster, like an earthquake, to see if the city can actually survive and recover. And the testing itself happens in stages. You don't just test the whole thing at once. You start small with a unit test, which is like checking a single building. Then you move up to a system integration test, making sure the entire city grid works together smoothly. The migration test is like a practice run of moving the first few citizens in. And then finally, the acceptance test is that last big walkthrough before the mayor officially hands over the keys. So, the city is built. It's been stress tested to its absolute limits, and it's passed with flying colors. Now, we come to the most critical moment of all, Phase 3, the launch. It's time to open the gates and let the people in. But how you do that? Well, that's a decision with some massive consequences. You essentially have two main options here. The first is called the Big Bang. That's where you shut the old city down one night and you open the new one the next morning. It's high risk, but it's pretty simple, and it's over fast. The other option is the parallel changeover. That's where you run both the old city and the new city at the same time for a while. It's much, much lower risk, but it's incredibly complex and expensive to maintain both at once. So you might be thinking, well, everyone would choose this safer, parallel option, right? But here's what's so fascinating. In the real world, the super high-risk Big Bang is the one that gets used most often. So why? Well, it's because it concentrates all the risk into a single intense period when the entire project team is on full alert, totally prepared and ready to fix anything that goes wrong, like instantly. So that just begs the question, if you're choosing the riskiest path, how do you possibly manage an event with such high stakes? You do it with military-grade precision and planning, and it all leads up to one single critical moment, the point of no return. Here's how it works. First, you create this incredibly detailed minute-by-minute plan for the entire launch window. Second, you build in multiple go, no-go milestones along the way. At each of these points, you check your progress, and if anything seems off, you can abort the mission and go back to the old system. But then, you define the point of no return. That's the one step in the plan after which there is absolutely no turning back. Once you cross that line, you're all in. And success! The launch goes off without a hitch. The new digital city is live and it's fully operational. But the work isn't quite over yet. Those first few hours and days are a period of really high alert, just making sure the first citizens have a smooth experience and that the city runs exactly as it was designed to. So during this initial period, the project team, the people who actually built the city, they stick around. They're on high alert, providing on-site support for any immediate issues. They're watching the monitoring systems like hawks for anything that looks weird or unexpected. And only after the system proves itself to be stable is it gradually handed over to the long-term systems managers, the new city government. So there you have it. From an empty room to a thriving digital city, that's the incredible journey of deploying infrastructure. Our entire digital world is built on the back of launches just like these happening flawlessly day in and day out. Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. What's the hidden cost to our society, to our economy, to our daily lives when they